Right after graduating college, I got a job, but instead of getting my own place, I had moved into my parents' place. The plan was to save enough money to buy my own house in 5 years, and my dream came to fruition exactly as planned. I began dating again in the first week of moving out, since I no longer had to worry about telling my date that I lived with my parents. None of the blind dates worked out as I had hoped, but by chance, I met a really nice girl while shopping at a supermarket. Her name's Grace, she's 24, and she was working as an accountant at the time. We had dated for about 3 months when her apartment lease was about to expire and she was looking for a new place to rent. I was madly in love with her and suggested that she should move in with me. Grace didn't exactly say yes right away, and so I kept trying to convince her for days. One day, she told me that she needed to speak to me about moving in. I thought she was breaking up with me, but as it turned out, I was totally off base. To make long story short, she basically told me that she sees ghosts. Not only that, she can also communicate with them, and according to her, not all of them are friendly. She warned me that I might experience some bizarre things if she did move in with me. Her ability tends to attract lost spirits, and essentially what she goes through, I'll always experience them partially or fully. She didn't think that it was a good idea, but I disagreed, of course. I told her that if that was the price I had to pay to be closer to her, then it was not an issue to me. Grace moved in after a week, and it didn't take long for me to realize that she was most likely telling the truth about the ghosts. For example, I would be reading a book in the living room when suddenly the light by the front door turns on by itself. We have motion-activated light in the front yard, and so it only comes on when someone's about halfway into our yard. I had seen a deer activating the light on the first week of moving in, but that was just a one-time thing. After Grace moved in, the light incident happened pretty much every night. There were also times when I'm doing dishes in the kitchen and some inexplicable happenings took place. I finish the dishes, then turn around to go to my office or the living room when the cabinet behind me slams open. The haunting intensified with time, and things at home just wasn't the same. It was taking a toll on me and Grace. I was stressed out from the hours of waking up and right up to the hours that we went to bed. Grace, on the other hand, felt terrible for the whole thing. I try to be nice to her, but at times I just snap at her for no reason. The constant torture of noises and things moving put me right on the edge of insanity. Then something happened one night, which terrified me like never before. I was awoken to the sensation of something rubbing my feet. I opened my eyes, and I swear to God, I saw a dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. I get up and the thing runs out of the bedroom. I follow it out and hear footsteps running downstairs. I run to the stairs, and about halfway down, something trips me and I roll over several times before landing on the first floor. I try to get up, but I feel disoriented. That's when Grace comes over to me, takes off her robe, and presses it against my forehead. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a huge gash open on my forehead. We went to the emergency room. I got 20 stitches to close the gash, and we returned home. A few days thereafter, Grace moved out without telling me when I was at work. She no longer worked at the same place. She had changed her phone number and thus made it impossible for me to look for her. The haunting stopped on the very day she moved out. I don't know how to feel about this. On one hand, I feel relieved that my life has finally gone back to being normal, but on the other hand, I miss Grace terribly. If you look at her situation realistically, I don't think she could ever expect to have a normal life. That also means all her relationships will be complicated as well, and that's putting it mildly. I feel happy, but at the same time guilty and sad for feeling happy. The way I feel makes me question if I ever truly loved her. Wherever she is, I just hope she's okay. There's a section of a forest in my town that's unofficially off limits to the public. Stories of a creature roaming the forest goes back more than 100 years, and the sighting continues till this day. I've never been to the forest myself, and naturally, I've never seen the creature with my own eyes. A few of my friends have been there before, and they swear to have seen it, but I have a hard time believing they are telling the truth. During the last summer vacation, my best friend Lily kept insisting that we should check out the forest before we left for college. She made it sound so dramatic, like it was our last chance to be there, even though our families still live here. I gave in to her constant pestering after a few days, and we headed toward the forest with her boyfriend Jacob. You know, I gotta admit, this section of the forest is definitely spooky. It's peculiar how much darker it feels in these woods. I don't know if it's the density of trees that make the difference, or if it's just us running wild with our imagination. Either way, it's spooky as hell in here. We walk for about 10 minutes when Jacob tells us that he has to urinate. He walks off to somewhere further and we wait idle in the same spot. Not even a minute goes by when Jacob screams from the top of his lungs. Lily and I both look like we just heard Jacob die, but then he runs toward us and says, "Thanks for coming to my rescue, scary cats." Lily asks, "What happened?" "Oh, now you're concerned," responds Jacob sarcastically. "I'm not sure. I think it was an owl or maybe a hawk. Something scratched my back and then it flew off." "Let me see," says Lily, seemingly concerned. We both take a look at Jacob's back and find the wound to be far more severe than he thinks. We could see that his shirt had been shredded right in the middle, and when we lift it up, there are 4 clear claw marks on his back. It surely seemed to be from an animal, but I've never heard of owls or hawks doing that to people. I say to the guys, I think it's time we leave this forest." Jacob tries to reach the wound with his finger, and when he does, he realizes he's bleeding badly. He says, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." We ran out of the forest and went straight to the hospital. I can't remember how many, but Jacob needed a ton of stitches to get his wound patched up. He survived, but the doctor did tell us something interesting before we left. He mentioned that the wound could not have come from the talons of bird of prey. He said the wounds were too deep and wide to have been caused by one. That got us all confused because Jacob would have seen the animal if it was something big and on land. What could have possibly hurt a big guy like Jacob so badly in such a short amount of time? No one had the answer, and that makes it tempting to say that it must have been the creature of the forest. But you know what? I haven't seen it with my own eyes, so I think I'll reserve judgment for now. My friend Danny took me to Montana last year when he was visiting his grandpa at his ranch. It was just me, Danny, and his little brother Kevin. They hadn't seen their grandpa in a year, and they wanted to surprise him for his birthday. I went with them because I didn't have much planned for the summer, and also because I thought it'd be kind of fun to see where Danny grew up as a kid. We did the birthday thing, checked out the cute shopping strip they have in that town, which was literally just 1 block of stores and that's it. I had seen that kind of town in films, but it was surreal to see it in real life. As charming and quaint the town looked, I couldn't picture myself living in a town of only a few hundred inhabitants. On the last day of our visit, Danny wanted to show me this supposed haunted house they've got in town. The short background of the haunted house goes something like this. A woman was happily married to her husband, and they lived in that house. They had a daughter, and she was 5 years old when the husband had an affair with the housekeeper. The wife tried to reason with the husband, but his heart already belonged to someone else. The husband left with the housekeeper, but he also took one thing that the wife couldn't live without. He had taken their daughter as well. The wife fell ill in despair and sorrow. She soon passed away, and their soul has been haunting the house ever since. It sounded to me like your generic haunted house story, but still, I was intrigued. So me, Danny, and Kevin go to the house, and surprisingly, it's really well kept. The cleanliness kind of diminishes the suspense, but it's still eerie to see an empty old house filled with furniture from the early 1900s. We check out the first floor, and it feels like I'm in a museum. I'm more excited to be witnessing an old history rather than being scared of standing in this supposed haunted house. Then we go to the second floor, and the mood changes quite a bit. The first floor was normal. The sunlight came in from the outside, and therefore it was bright everywhere. But here in the upstairs, the owner had for some reason covered all the windows with wood panels, meaning you couldn't just take them off like you would with curtains or blinds. The only light sources that help us see is coming from downstairs and the tiny streaks of lights peering out from the narrow gaps in the wood panels. Danny and Kevin enter the room while I'm admiring a painting on the wall. They soon call me to join them in the room, and I walk toward it but stop short of entering it. The reason for my hesitation to enter the room was the sight of 3 individuals standing in it. It was only me, Danny, and Kevin who had entered the house, so if I'm outside by the door, then who is the third person in the room? I tell the boys, guys, don't turn around and just back out slowly. I tell them that because the unknown person in the room is right behind the boys. I didn't want them to panic, and I definitely didn't want the other person to go ballistic either. However, our natural instinct to face the person whom we are talking to is quite dominant. And so the boys turn around, they see the person, and they scream their lungs out as they run toward me. On the way out, Kevin trips on a rug, and both Danny and I go back to help him up. That's when I see the face of the person who was in their room. It was a woman. She looks really pale, so pale that she almost looks transparent. I'm scared, but I don't see any malice in her eyes. All I see is pain and sorrow. Still, we help Kevin up and run out of the house faster than the flash. It was such a relief once we were outside. We walked back to Danny's grandpa and told him about what we had seen in the haunted house. He told us that he wasn't born yet when the house still had residents. He too had only heard of the stories, but as far as he was concerned, the story about the woman was real. Her husband did in fact have an affair. He did take the daughter with him, and the wife did pass away soon after. That day before leaving, I asked Danny to drive me to the tiny shopping strip in town. I bought some flowers and a Bible from the general store, then left them by the doorstep at the woman's house. I don't know how much of the story is true, but I do know that I had seen a woman who seemed to be in despair. I think I just wanted to leave her with some love and the words from God. I truly hope she'll find peace one day. I work as a graphic artist under the bright lights of New York City, but this is not the life I imagined I have at the age of 27. That sentence makes it seem like I don't enjoy my life, but that's not it. To be more specific, I was born in a small town in Alabama, and my family's been in the farm and ranch business for generations. My 2 brothers and a sister work for my father, learning the family business, so when I was young, even until when I was in junior high, I always thought I'd be working for Dad as well. Today, there's 1,000 miles of distance between me and the home where I grew up in. My life has changed quite a bit from the days of riding horses at my father's ranch. I loved it there, but ever since the first time I saw a picture of New York City, I just knew it was a place where I wanted to be. At first, I thought I was acting like any other small town kid would, seeing something so vastly different from what surrounds him. But as I gotten older, I sensed there was a deeper connection, even though I couldn't figure out what that connection was. That sense of connectedness is what convinced me to take the job in New York, even though another position in San Francisco was offering more money. Some time ago, I needed to find some books for my research, and so I went to the library. I found 2 out of the 3 books that I needed, and one of them had been checked out. It's on old literature, and not many people look for it. No other libraries in New York City had them, and I was told that it should be returned within 5 days. I could get most of the information I needed with the 2 books I borrowed, and therefore that was not a problem. The only thing was, though, I had an unusual experience with the lady who was helping me. As soon as I went up to speak to her, I had a smile on my face before I even knew it. And it wasn't one of those fake smiles you put on to be polite and friendly either. It was a genuine smile. It was like my body just reacted to seeing her. A good comparison would be how your body and mind reacts to your family when you have been away from them for a long time. Imagine you haven't seen your mother in 10 years and you see her waiting for you right outside of the gate of the airport. Your eyes begin to moisten, your heart beats a little faster, and you have a smile on your face even though you're crying. All those things happen naturally, and you're not planning or thinking of performing those actions. That's essentially what was happening to me when I saw the middle-aged librarian. She looked to be in her 50s, looked very sophisticated, and was well-spoken. I spoke to her politely as any normal person would. I was smiling for some reason, but then at the end of our conversation she said, "I think you might have something in your eyes, young man." I responded, "Excuse me?" Then rubbed my eyes and found that I was crying. My eyes didn't itch, nor did it have anything in it. I was simply crying for some reason. I told the lady that it was my allergy and returned home. Back in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I could barely concentrate on my research, and all I thought of was of her and why I cried when I saw her. I began to frequent the library almost every day, and with time, I became friends with the librarian. Her name's Nancy, she's 55 years old, has 2 daughters, she's been working in the same library for 32 years, and she's a widower. We fast became friends because, as it turns out, we both felt similar familiarity to each other. It wasn't just me who felt like I knew her, but she felt the same way toward me as well. There was one key difference though. I had no idea why I felt about her that way. But as for Nancy, she knew exactly why. I took her to a restaurant for dinner one night, and she had brought some old photos of hers. The photos were taken when she was in her 20s. The first time I saw her face at such young age, it felt like someone took a hold of my heart and just squeezed it so I couldn't breathe. I was incredibly overtaken with emotions, but that wasn't the biggest surprise of the night. About a month ago in the same restaurant, she had told me that her husband had passed away 30 years ago from a car accident. When she was telling me that, I could feel that his passing was still hurting her even after all these years. And now, back to our second dinner, she was searching for something in the stack of photos she had brought. She finds what she was looking for and hands it to me as she says, "That's my Joseph, the only man I ever loved." I look at the photo and I see me in it, or rather, a man who looks exactly like me. Aside from the haircut and the outdated fashion, anyone comparing me to that photo would say that's my father. I finally found out why Nancy felt the way she did toward me, but I still couldn't explain why I felt the same way as she did. I could think of an outlandish explanation to this, but how could that be possible? I think you know what I'm grasping at here. What if I was Joseph? If you think about it, how could I not be? Do me a favor, put your skepticism away and open your mind for a minute. I have a random encounter with a woman in her 50s. For some reason, she makes me smile and cry out of sheer happiness. The woman feels the same way for me, and by some miracle of chances, I happen to look exactly the same as her husband, who passed away 30 years ago. When you look at all that's happened so far, the conclusion isn't how outlandish my statement is, but rather how plausible the impossible may be. I know it sounds crazy. It is crazy. But try as I may, I can't shake this feeling. I love this woman. I feel this connection with Nancy, and I can't help it. Having said that, Nancy wants to remain as friends. My rational side tells me that's the right thing to do, but of course my heart says otherwise. I think we'll continue to be friends, but I don't know that I'll ever find another woman who makes me feel the same way as Nancy does. As Emily Dickinson once wrote in a letter consoling her friend, the heart wants what it wants.